to become aware of that emotion and not let it govern your actions and your responses. And so it's that filtering process that you can increase as you learn, as you grow older. I can feel overwhelmed, and that's just this one simple tactic I use to actually slow myself down into the moment and just focus on that singular task and move forward.
JD, I have a tradition on this podcast, and I begin by asking my guest 4 questions. And the root of the question is, how are you doing? But how are you doing 1.1 is, how are you doing physically? Would you be so kind to share?
First of all, thanks so much for having me. I think it's great to be part of this journey of the African CEO. And so to get to your first question, how am I doing physically? I'm doing well. The energy's good. Maintaining my diet and my exercise. I'm pretty pedantic around that. So if people start messing with that, I tend to get a bit angry. But I'm keeping it real and getting to it. So energy is looking good. Health is pretty good. Yeah, thanks for asking.
Boiling down, spilling over into 1.2, emotionally, how are you doing?
Also quite good. Been quite a bit of a rough ride the last few years. But at the moment, it feels like I've actually made quite a significant gain in terms of emotional intelligence, and now have the opportunity to apply it under a bit more pressure, as the good times, but also challenging times are there in terms of more work, more contracts, a fuller life, which is fantastic. But yes, I got to raise the game, but going well, thanks.
Just a follow-up question on that. Emotional intelligence increasing? Could you kindly explain that concept?
Sure. Wow. Yeah, that's quite a big concept. So I like to work with a multiple intelligence theory approach, whatever you'd like to call it. And so we all have your normal rational intelligence or IQ. We're all aware of that. And then probably a lot of people also the emotional intelligence, which is the side of you that can interpret the environment and changing circumstances and what that means to you. So if something happens and you feel afraid or anxious, to become aware of that emotion and not let it govern your actions and your responses. And so it's that filtering process that you can increase as you learn, as you grow older, etc. And it's exactly that which I've gone through in the past, the challenging times, which have taught me to calm down and don't let my emotions get the better of me. As the old saying goes, emotions aren't reality. You need to step back, think about what you're feeling, and then start replacing it by using your imagination positively. So what happens is there's a stimulus from our environment, and then all of a sudden, what we do is we think of all the worst things that could happen, and then we start reacting from that space. But the moment we can say, wait, hang on, is this what is actually happening? And then decide on how I actually want to approach this. And obviously, that's just kind of skimming the surface of what emotional intelligence is, but that's what it is for me. And it's been a long journey, and I'm applying from what I've learned.
Thank you for sharing that. And we will come back to the 4 intelligence from your book later on in this podcast. From a spiritual point of view, how would you say that you're doing?
Okay, so it's a good question. It's always a tricky one, and when you say spiritual, probably there's a number of podcasts you can just do on that aspect. But spiritually, for me, I'm doing quite well. That's an area that I've always loved to focus on. I enjoy linking the metaphysical, the abstract, the sometimes even esoteric kind of knowledge, and incorporated that into my life personally, in terms of where I come from, where I belong, a greater good that I believe in, and for me to connect back on that on a daily basis, that's quite a strong habit. And so it's going quite well. I feel on target, on purpose, and at ease with who I am in the world. So, good.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. And the last one is mental. From a mental point of view, how would you define your mental clarity and your headspace?
Yeah, I need to up my game at the moment because of all the wonderful challenges and opportunities to remain focused. So, I mean, they all interlink, right? The emotional, physical, mental, spiritual. But if you get to the mental, it's the thinking game. It's the ordering of your thoughts, and not letting the thoughts just run the one after the other, but being very deliberate and organizing your thoughts. And I find that, using a little list on a daily basis, maybe it's a bit negative, but I call it a kill list, right? Because I love to hunt the tasks down and get them done, knock them out. And so if I take that little list every day, small, fits in my pocket, use a pen, and as I progress, I just tick them off one by one, scratch it out, beautiful big fat tick, and that's a little dopamine rush, accomplished throughout the day. And so I use that as a mental game because there's so much going on, I can feel overwhelmed, and that's just this one simple tactic I use to actually slow myself down into the moment and just focus on that singular task and move forward.
That's a pretty impressive technique. I love the kill list.
Yeah.
It seems like a sense of accomplishment, and I also use that myself to an extent. I want to go back to who JD is and how did he get here. If you could describe early memories of your childhood to someone who asked, what would that response be about your childhood?
Sure, we're taking the light topics here today. No, I like it. I like delving a little bit deeper. Early childhood memories, and kind of how does that feed into where I am today, if I hear you correctly. So some of my most memorable childhood memories are from Bloemfontein, where I was born. So on a spring day in Bloemfontein back in 1981. I'm giving away my age here, but that a beautiful time that we had. Things like cycling to school in a neighborhood with friends up and down the street, playing outside until dark, make believe, just having fun in the garden, building Lego. All of these things kind of happening within a 1 kilometer radius. You don't even have to go very far to get an adventure, And it was those moments that actually really stood out, and it's always with me, even to this day. And I think that it was that sense of adventure, because my parents actually they did missionary work when we were young, and so part of that we also not only the beautiful Bloemfontein memories, but also global memory. So we had the opportunity to move abroad. And we were taught from a young age 2 things. Reach out, there's more, but don't do it for yourself. Serve. Seek purpose. And I think that has fed into my healthy restlessness, if I can call it that. That right here where I am is awesome, and I'm so grateful for everything that I have. And tomorrow I can stand up and it can be more. And more to give, more to experience, more to have, more flourishing. And so it's that both, I guess, a sense of security and certainty within a fantastic family and a childhood environment, paired with an expansive reach towards a bigger world out there to serve and to know your purpose. And those 2 elements combined have always fed into my life as it is today.
Those 2 things that you mentioned, was that told to you or taught to you at an early age by your parents, or was it more, who taught that to you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, also the environments that we were exposed to due to the work, but also because of faith. So, I mean, back in the 80s, we were raised to honor everybody equally. I was in a church environment where we were white, brown, black, didn't matter. We were all the same. So I grew up with that. And so it was always either directly or indirectly communicated through church and Sunday school and things like that we all know, and some alternative ways as well as we travel the globe with my parents. You're put here for a reason. You're put here for a mission. You're not put here for your comfort. You're here essentially as a pilgrimage. This time on earth here. And if you start focusing on just making your life comfortable, you actually will lose it. If you look for happiness and comfort first, it's going to backfire. That's what we were taught. And obviously from a spiritual background, raised in a Christian environment, that was communicated as well. As I got older, I had to find my own way in that, my own spiritual path in terms of that. I kept a lot of what I learned from when I was a kid, but I've also had to grow and elaborate. And so, yes, to get back to your question, it was taught specifically, and then I added to a lot of that and I still do every day,
You mentioned something else about going to a multiracial church. How did that affect your childhood, being exposed to a diverse group of people during apartheid?
So I think it essentially made us colorblind. And on the one hand, on the other hand, I never forget it. So when I was in what we used to call Standard 6, was grade 8 today, right? There was, in our school, there was the first black girl that attended when I was there in my year. And I'd never forget. So she had one or two friends around her, but I would never forget the level of empathy I felt for her. That I just thought, wow, how brave she is for stepping up into that environment. And so I think, to answer your question, it was that level of sensitivity, empathy that just came through. It was just natural. It was just my fellow human being. And then if you spot somebody in a difficult situation like that, you immediately, I think that's my immediate gut response, is that level of empathy. We are all equal human beings on this planet Earth. And that is just as is for me. It's just I don't even want to say it's a non-negotiable. It sounds too corporate, but it's woven into the fabric of who I am.
Yeah, I understand that. And another question I had was around, you mentioned that you could cycle anywhere, just pick up your bike and go. How do you think children now are not as privileged to do that, to be able to do that, because of the environment that we live in? We can go into all sorts of issues of why this is, but how do you think that affects a kid's childhood?
I think you're raised with a sense of distrust. You cannot go outside. You do not know who the stranger is. Don't trust the stranger. And I think that you then take that into the rest of your life as you grow up. I don't know who you are. I can't trust you. I think there was a higher degree of trust, at least in the environment where I grew up. And I mean, once again, this is so tricky. It's so difficult to ask someone like me, because back then the environments were so different and unequal. Now, once again, the same, but for different reasons. You have the separation and the inequality. But I think that's it. I mean, it's just the openness to explore, the trusting yourself, the environment, your friends, that it will be okay. I can just go and do that. And I think now people are raised, no, don't go. Be careful. Don't talk to strangers and all that kind of stuff. And that's my opinion. I think, unfortunately, we bring it into our lives as adults.
I can see that, especially the distrust. How does distrust affect someone's life if that's what they're taught as a child? How does that play and spill over into other areas?
Well, I mean, and this is a point, and I can say a little bit, and I'd actually love to throw it back to you as well, in this regard. So, how does it spill over? Let's take work. From here we are talking about the African and CEO, and some of my work that we do is within the field of self-management as a leadership methodology and framework. And key part of the work that we do in the heart of the framework, it is trust. That's the first step. And so if you can't trust people, you can't build business relationships and grow. I remember Covey mentioned the speed of trust. I believe it was one of his books. So it takes time to build the trust, but once you have it, then you can speed things up. So the cost could be measured if the trust isn't there. What's your experience been?
With regards to trust, I agree with you. We could go into so many different facets of it. I think for me, from a personal experience, trust had to be something that was developed in every single environment, whether it's relationships, whether it's professional environment, in all different aspects, it had to be developed and kind of earned more than the usual because of what I was told growing up. Be careful, watch out. So I'm always on alert. And being aware of that now allows me to let my guard down a bit more. So to answer your question, I think that it has to start with being aware that you might have a trust problem and then putting steps in place in order to solve that problem. Being able to let your guard down, being able to be more vulnerable with someone. But we can definitely get more into that. I want to know about your professional journey because now you are a business coach, a multifaceted business coach. So could you walk us through the journey of how you came to be a business coach?
This is the section where the kids need to tune out because it's R-rated for a number of reasons. Yeah, it's painful, if you really have to go through that, at least the journey that I took to get to a business coach perspective. So studied in the humanities primarily. It's actually a cross-disciplined, transdiscipline or multidiscipline degree called BA PPE, Politics, Philosophy and Economics. And then I did a master's in business ethics. And then I couldn't get work. What do you do with a master's in business ethics? And I started digging and I got into coaching. That was probably around 2006 or something like that. Probably a friend told me, read something. I can't even remember exactly when. I just started exploring. I connected with organizations that coach and different online information, etc. And just started wherever I could. Coached friends, coached people at church, wherever I could.
How different was coaching back then compared to now?
It was kind of just emerging as something respected, but you still needed to tell people what it is. Where now, a lot of time in the business environment, you say coaching and people, they know what it is. You don't have to explain it anymore. Back then it was like, what do you mean? And so getting into that was a lot of fun. But a lot of fumbling around, a lot of trying, just doing, using every opportunity. It's improved my marriage significantly because the first part of it is to learn how to.
This episode is sponsored by Survive to Alive. Survive to Alive offers self-mastery and personal growth services for leaders, teams, and organizations. They help those who are open and hungry for a new horizon prepare for the future for work. The focus is on coaching and facilitating interventions that unleashes individual potential. Contact Survive to Alive for more information on their service offerings.
So I did a master's degree in business ethics and then kind of couldn't find work, right? And because of that, I just kept on digging and tried wherever I could to do the coaching. And long story, but in the end, it was stepping up into organizations and saying, look, I'll work for free, and getting the experience because of, there was nobody else there. The lady goes on maternity leave and they'd say, come do the work. And I'd jump in. But preceding that, I was unemployed, and things like that. So it was this fumbling around, trying to find my way, had an inkling of a greater purpose, which is leadership development, that I had early on, right? So I think my career has kind of flipped on its head. A lot of people start out with a skill, and so they jump in and I got to find a job, so that I can have an income. Where I've found a purpose of this leadership development and unleashing human potential focus on my life, and then I couldn't find work. And so then I started this skill, and I said, I like coaching, but I still can't coach. And so I got into coaching and worked in a number of organizations and got in-house training as a coach, essentially certified by those organizations. And one thing led to the other, and long journey up and down, left and right, led me to where I am today, where I'm both coaching young early career individuals as well as senior executives in large organizations. I can kind of work the whole expanse.
Just a follow-up question. You did mention that you found your purpose early on.
Yes.
What led to you finding your purpose?
Yeah, so I mean, we spoke about the early spiritual experiences, right? So obviously that immediately, there's kind of two levels to this, in my opinion. There's a broader purpose as a human being, as I mentioned, this pilgrimage journey, which I believe is informed, and at least in my instance, through a greater spiritual context. And then there's the second one, much more of an individual purpose, so a corporate purpose versus an individual purpose. And so the corporate purpose was kind of given there, but it doesn't, you don't really own it until it becomes an individual thing. And so I through my high school years, I was kind of messed up and did a whole bunch of stupid things, like I guess a lot of people. Had my rebellious years, and then I took a gap year. And in that gap year, call it what you will, divine intervention, spiritual experience, I found myself on my knees realizing I'm not going anywhere. What's happening here? And my parents were amazing. I mean, they just kind of allowed this to happen. Now being a parent, I'm like, how could they have done that? And so in that gap year, it changed my life. And that's, so from there, I started studying, and it was from that moment I actually had that spiritual experience of rediscovering my roots, essentially. It was awoken in me. I mean, I didn't have that. I was never, I didn't lead anything in high school. I was never, and I'm still not an organizational leader, and that's something we can talk about, levels of leadership and etc. later on. But I was never like this, never in leadership. I never wanted to perform, never wanted to stand out. All I wanted to do was get by with a good C so I can go to university and study what I didn't know. But from that moment, I had it. And so it was there early on when I started studying, and then kind of the studies just took shape. I guess, maybe somebody might call it luck. For me, it was absolute divine intervention, spiritual led. Things came together beyond a way that I could have wished for. I still use all the knowledge and all my studies I got from varsity, from somebody that didn't know what he wanted to do, to almost putting his finger down in the yearbook and saying, okay, let me go study that. That looks kind of good. And then I was like a monomaniac on a mission. I was just studying day in and day out, maybe a bit too serious. But the pendulum swings, right? I was off on a kind of rebellious stint during high school, and then varsity years I was off to the other side, being quite serious and intentional. But it served me well. Got the degree done quite quickly, and then started moving on and kept on exploring on this journey of purpose that I had, from a young age. And I think it seems like it. Not a lot of people get this kind of insight. It doesn't make me special or whatever, maybe a little bit different in terms of how I got there. But all I can say is I'm holding on and I'm enjoying this journey.
For someone who is feeling a bit lost, someone listening to this, watching this, who may be feeling lost, who, like you, when you had your gap year, they seek that direction of what it is that they want to do, but they don't have the guidance of their parents or support. What's your advice to that person? Where would they start?
In some way or form, you need to connect to a greater reality yourself that informs your unique belonging and purpose in this world. Everybody has that. And don't confuse purpose with job. Purpose, in my opinion, is a way of adding value in any circumstance, relationship, time period you might find yourself in. We all have that. You have inherent value. You can take that value and you can build skills and gifts. And you can keep moving forward and in a daily basis make a significant difference in each and every life that you encounter. And that would be my suggestion is, what can you read? Who can you talk to? Is it self-development books? Can you, maybe it's, have you abandoned the previous spiritual traditions? And I avoid the word religion here, and that might be something, a complete different discussion. I avoid the word religion. But spiritual traditions of your friends, families, forefathers, where can you go back in? I believe, in the past we used to go to rabbis and priests, and that no longer is true. We've abandoned that. We find a lot of more truths, unfortunately, and maybe it's pills, maybe it's a bottle, maybe it's something else, maybe it's even a psychologist. And I'm not psychology bashing here, but something greater, something deeper that we potentially have lost. I had the privilege of being raised in such a tradition, and I could fall back on that. If you can't fall back on that, you can still go and get it. It's available. Ask, knock, seek, and you will find.
So to summarize what you're saying, put yourself out there. Go and experience. Go and read a book. Go and watch a podcast. Just put yourself out there.
That's it. I couldn't have said it better myself, and thank you for summarizing my long-winded answer.
So JD, you have a book, which everybody listening and watching, I recommend that you read. It is called Unleash Your Superpower and Live a Life of Significance, which I love the title. In one of the chapters, you mentioned that failure is the process. Could you walk us through what that means?
Yeah, it's, I think and I think you mentioned it earlier, right? You kind of taught to be careful, in Afrikaans, pas op, moenie, careful, don't, And life is beautiful because we make mistakes and we learn on a daily basis. That's actually how we get anywhere, is through trial and error. I love there's a saying that says, the first year of your life you are taught to walk and talk, and the rest of your life to sit down and shut up.
Yeah.
So this natural exploration, testing, adventure, I think is trained out of us, because a lot of society and the schooling system, for example, is still geared towards creating nice factory workers and soldiers. That's completely outdated. You need to say, what's a small experiment that I can go test and learn from today? And I mean, our lives are just actually a whole series of experiments that we can test and learn from and keep on improving. And that's what failure is. That's all. The actual real failure is only when you give up. That's the only failure. Otherwise, just keep going. And I had to learn this. I had my first permanent job out of varsity that I also got because I just kind of went there and volunteered. The CEO of a small startup put me in cold calling, and lots of fun. And then there I was sitting with my headset and doing Skype calls, and after like a month I sucked. Nothing worked. Okay, and I went back to him and I said, this isn't working. He says like, no, that's fine. I'm like, what do you mean it's fine? I'm unsuccessful. I'm a failure, right? And he said, no, that was just so that you can get over yourself. And I was like, I was ticked off, right? I was like, how can you do that to me? You're wasting my time. This is, And then looking back, it's one of the biggest gifts anybody could ever have given me. Because I learned that if somebody says no, it doesn't mean I am a failure. It just means that right now it's not working. Potentially try something else. Try an alternative route, product, time, person. Just keep on trying.
So would you agree that to change someone's perspective of failure, they have to fail?
Yeah, there's no other way around it. I think so. Well, maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit. What do you mean? What made you think of that?
I heard this. Let me use an analogy. So when you're playing against computer chess, I'm not sure if you ever played against any sort of computer game.
Yeah.
Back in the day. The first game, you would annihilate the computer.
Yeah.
No doubt. The second game, you would also win, but it gets a bit more challenging. The third game, it gets more challenging. The fourth game, maybe you're not going to win. The fifth game, you're definitely not going to win. Why? Because that computer game is learning each game how to play.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as failure for that computer game. All there is a series of tests. Test after test after test after test. Until it gets so good that there's no way in hell that you're beating that computer game. And that changed my perspective of failure. Just see it as a series of tests.
Yeah.
Test after test after test until you get so good that nobody can or nothing can faze you.
That computer has no emotion. There's no battle between what's going on and I feel threatened, and that's where you can get into a lot of good. You have to, for everybody out there, learn about emotions, learn about the brain chemicals, the dopamine, serotonin. We spoke about this earlier. We spoke about it, the emotional intelligence earlier. That is so critical. And I don't know if, what's your perspective on the whole emotional intelligence side of things? I was rambling on about it, but what have you experienced in terms of emotional intelligence and the influence on success because of your level of emotional intelligence?
Emotional intelligence based on the level of success?
Yeah, so how does it influence it? So if, for example, if you had higher levels of emotional intelligence, does that translate into high level of success?
I think firstly we would have to define what success is. But to answer the emotional intelligence question, in my opinion, once more, it has to be learned. It has to be something that you develop over time. And there's many ways it can be done. Before I answer, in your book, you wrote down that there are 4 different types of intelligence. Could you kindly explain those 4?
Yeah. And big disclaimer, as I mentioned earlier, I've got a master's in business ethics, which is essentially a philosophy. I'm a philosopher, like the big ideas, etc. So whatever I've learned around this, it's self-taught and read and explored and experienced, etc. So there are, and it's a lot of this is Howard Gardner's work on multiple intelligences, and then so he, etc. But without getting into too much detail here, I like usually a simplified approach. So I like the 4 major intelligences, and those are the spiritual intelligence, your rational intelligence, your emotional intelligence, and also your physical intelligence. So your spiritual intelligence, we spoke about this earlier, but it's about your connection with the divine and understanding that reason is not the highest human function, but it's actually our capability to understand our place in this world from something outside of ourselves and governing our lives according to that wisdom. That's a kind of short for spiritual intelligence. Your rational intelligence, we are all a lot more familiar with that. It's your IQ, and the reality around that is the IQ test was invented to see where the shortfall is and where the system has to help people improve and develop their rational intelligence, the IQ. So it's something that we measure it and say that's just what it is. No, that's not right. So it's just as a bit of a side note, and that's maybe another whole podcast right there. And then you've got your emotional intelligence, which we spoke about, and it's your level of perception and interpretation of what circumstances, events, and relationships mean in your life, and how do you want to respond to that. That's one way. And then the last is physical intelligence, and that's if you think about your presence in this world, how do you operate? So, for example, with physical intelligence, your athletes, they understand their place in this world, and they have a body physical intelligence. That's one way of seeing it. There are a number of other ways of also understanding it, but yeah, your physical presence in this world, and how do you mechanically operate within the processes, systems, etc. Yeah, and maybe I'll note integral theory, and we'll talk about that potentially in another conversation in the future.
Thank you for that answer. 20-something JD is listening and watching this podcast right now. If you could say 3 things to 20-something-year-old JD, what would they be?
Just relax, man. It's like you're taking yourself too seriously, you know. Relax, have more fun, you know, and trust it will come. That'll probably be another thing. It'll happen. I don't have to push so hard and try so hard to make things happen. I think that's the only 2 things. I was pushing hard. I was putting in efforts. I got married when I was 22, man, and that has been the best investment of my life. That is, if anybody asks me greatest success, that's a great success. But yes, we started early. We decided to get married and move on with life together from a very young age. But that set the tone, you know. Looking back, I would have said, no, that's fantastic, but now just have some fun and go overseas. And I was very much purpose and focused, you know, and moving. And now I'm like, it'll come. Relax.
Thank you, JD, for your time, for your wisdom, for your presence, and also the work that you're doing in this world. Thank you for your purpose and how you are impacting and just helping so many other individuals like myself, and just to prosper and be the best they can be, and just to serve and to impact in Africa. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to next time.